What is going on, IF Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and today I wanted to tackle something special. I wanted to talk on the psychological aspects of being successful with intermittent fasting. I'm always looking at my comments section to see where you guys stand in terms of intermittent fasting. And I do get a lot of people that say they love the protocol, but then I also get a lot of people that say they tried it and it was just too difficult for them. So I'm going to go ahead and use studies to show how you can actually strategically apply a habit. And if you're having a lot of trouble getting into intermittent fasting, this is the video that you want to watch. Stay tuned. For this, we're going to go ahead and look at two studies. One study that was actually looking at brain functions and brain signals to determine what moves the body to form a habit. And the second study focuses on the tools that you can use to apply a habit. So the first study that we're going to look at was published in the Dialogues of Clinical Neuroscience. And here they wanted to focus on the habit promoting brain region. They created a T-shaped map and had rats go through the maze where they had to make simply one decision. Either they turn right or they turn left. What they did was, of course, they had an audio cue say turn right when they got to that fork in the road. And what they noticed was, of course, the rats would stop, not really know where to go, even though they heard that audio cue, and they'll turn left or right. But when they turned left, there was nothing there. When they turned right, there was a reward. And they continued this process over and over and over again, with the audio cue still signaling turn right. Eventually, the rat got the idea that it needs to turn right. And every time it turns left, it knows that there would not be a reward at that end. So the rat would basically not only go super fast throughout the course, but wouldn't even stop to look around. It would literally beeline straight and make a right, even completely ignoring the audio cues, as they would switch the audio cues to say turn left, or they will put a signaling cue on the floor and not even put an audio cue, but it'll still turn right. Why? Because the rat started to build a habit. Now this seems simple enough. Just do something over and over again. What's the big deal? But you must realize that there is a deeper understanding than simply repetition, which is why studies like this are conducted, because it's more complicated than simple repetition. That is why people repeat certain things and they create a habit, but then break the habit and go in the opposite direction. They were repeating the same things over and over again, but they still fell off the wagon. Why do they fall off if it's just all about repetition? That's because it's not. The scientists looked at two parts of the brain. They looked at the dorsolateral stratum cortex and the infralimbic cortex. Both of them tied heavily to repetition, habit, and memorization. They realized that it wasn't simply the act of turning to the right, but it was the composite of everything put together that allowed those rats to make that decision and make it habitually. This system is called action chunking. So basically, from the moment the gate is open to commence the path to that fork in the road, neuropathic signals start to fire. They notice that it fires in the beginning when the rat meets the fork in the road and when it reaches its destination. 3 times throughout that course, those neuropathic signals were firing. It didn't just fire when they reached the reward, it fired 3 times on the path to that reward, because the brain was producing action chunking. Now there's a very particular part of the brain called the cortical basal ganglia circuits. This particular part of the brain implicates skill acquisition and habit formation. It undergoes neural activity changes as the brain develops through repetition. This then maps your routine so that you can get to the end result. So how do you apply this to yourself? How do you apply this to intermittent fasting, or to build a habit with intermittent fasting? You have to do action chunking. It is the reason why you remember phone numbers. You don't remember phone numbers as one single phrase of numbers. You remember phone numbers because of the sequence of numbers. You create that sequential rhythm. Phone numbers is an easy way to understand how action chunking works. Simply focusing on just intermittent fasting may actually set you up for failure. What you want to do is you want to set up an action chunking scenario. That is why intermittent fasting is easier when you're at work, for example. Now your argument might be, well, I'm just at work. I have no opportunity. I can only go to lunch once. That's the reason why it works. But let's stop kidding ourselves. There are so many instances at work where somebody has snacks, where you get 15-minute breaks, where somebody can bring snacks and you could just go to the back and eat some snacks, where you could go downstairs, grab a snack, go to a vending machine, grab snacks there. You can eat throughout the course of your workday, even if you have one lunchtime period, but you don't. I mean, you can, but you most likely don't. And that's because you have set up an action chunking. The process of going to work, working, then going to lunch, eating, then stopping and going back to work is a sequential system that provides action chunking, thus making it easier for you to create a habit and stick to that habit. Now, what is the number one reason why people stop doing things like intermittent fasting? Even if they did great from Monday through Friday, they start to fall off Saturday and Sunday because you're no longer at work. The action chunking is gone. You're now in this abyss of you don't know how to order things, and you're thinking now about the food that you're going to eat. You're completely throwing off your sequence. You're focusing so heavily on eating that you end up maybe breaking your intermittent fasting protocol. Then because you broke your intermittent fasting protocol and you have another day where you're not working, you have 2 consecutive days off, and you go ahead and break your protocol that time too, now you have 2 consecutive days where you have completely gone off the rail. Now, what would this mean for you? This means that getting back into that habit on Monday is going to be very, very difficult for you. You need to set up action chunking for Saturday and Sunday so that you can continue to build that habit. The consistency will allow you to build the habit. So what do? You create scenarios for when you're at home. Create little projects for yourself. Create things that you're going to do prior and after eating. Your disolateral stratum cortex will start to fire initially as you start the process, not as you start to eat. What can be action chunking? Anything. If you wake up in the morning and you have a dog, walk your dog. After you walk your dog, take a shower. Get ready to go to the gym. Go to the gym. After you go to the gym, go home. Pick a Netflix show to watch. Watch a Netflix show or movie. After you finish that, if it's now your eating window, go ahead and eat. After you finish doing that, go ahead and start your homework, or go ahead and start on a project that you've been consistently working on, or go on the computer and watch informative YouTube videos like this one. Then maybe listen to music. It's whatever your preference is. If you're a Netflix watcher, then watch Netflix. If you're a music lover, then listen to music. If you're a gym rat and you want to go to the gym 2 times in one day, then you can go to the gym. Whatever you want to do, just start to build a sequence going into eating and a sequence coming out of eating. That will allow the habit promoting brain region to actually start to map out sequences so that it can form that habit. Looking at the British Journal of General Practice, you'll see a list of things that you can actually do to get yourself in a position to build a sequence. Talk to yourself. Tell yourself, I'm going to do this to start. I'm going to do this to start. Every time this happens, I do this. Every time I walk the dog and come back home, I go to the gym. Every time I go to the gym and come back home, I listen to music. Map out the day. If you map out the day, you will actually start targeting those pathways in your brain to signal to build habits. Habit forming isn't simply, I'm not going to eat, I'm just not going to eat, and doing different things surrounding that specific area of not eating and eating. If you build habits all throughout the day, you actually increase your ability to follow through with all of those parts as it becomes a sequence. So I felt like this video had to be made because I wanted you guys to be able to dive deeper into the scientific literature on what exactly is triggering in your brain to make you fall out of a habit or even start a habit for that matter. There's so many people that I hear fall off the intermittent fasting train, loved intermittent fasting, loved how they felt. It isn't a thing where they didn't like it, it's just that they simply stopped doing it, but would love to go back into it, had a lot of energy, felt great about it, but just can't get out of that rut. Or it's just that they have the fear that they will fall back into the normal eating pattern anyways. So hopefully this video was very informative and applicable so that you can actually use this moving forward if you're having problems getting into the habit of intermittent fasting. The links to the dialogues in clinical neuroscience and the British Journal of General Practice will be linked down in the description below. And if you want to look at the British Journal of General Practice's actual bullet points for exactly how to implement these habits. And of course, I want to thank my patrons from my Patreon, and I'm going to put their names right up here.